What is up? It's Sarah with the Home for Humanity podcast, and since this is my last episode I will be dropping this year of 2023, I will also say Happy New Year! 2023 is really the birth of the first set of the Home for Humanity podcast as a project in my life, one that I care deeply about, and it is no surprise that I end the year with a cherry on top of an interview with Nichole Frandanisa, the host of the Jesus Take the Deal podcast. Her and her PNW team have an amazing studio that they just remodeled, and I had the honor of being one of the first newbies to see it right before it's finished, and it's so lovely. And her studio space where she records her podcast with all sorts of cool guests and co-host Justin. It was just an honor to go there in person and interview this conversation. Nichole, like her podcast talks about, is a place for real stories, real faith, and real conversations and real deals. And she has enough experience as a landlord herself and an investor herself that she, as a spokesperson for the Washington real estate investors community, stands out to me as a light in the community. She is, like she says a little bit in this conversation, she opens up about imposter syndrome, which so many investors have, especially when they start out. So many agents have, like I have as a new agent. And even though I have almost a year and a half of experience under my belt, I'm still this is just the tip of the iceberg. They always say real estate is one of those industries that you just keep learning and learning forever. And it's true. It's so broad and vast. And people like Nichole provide a shining example of what I aspire to be, which is someone that has deep integrity, because in the end, those are the people who have real success and long-term success in the industry of real estate, are people who are honest, who have a guiding example of integrity and ethics to lead them, and a community to support and hold them accountable for that. And so Nichole and the people who I've met at the Washington Real Estate Investors meetups and panels that Nichole hosts herself and does a great job of asking questions and teasing out answers from people with a lot of experience to help people. Like at these meetups, it's a very broad array of people. So I encourage you to come if you haven't been to one, so plug on that. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Nichole. We talk about so much. We talk about faith, we talk about marriage, we talk about what it means to be a landlord. We talk about her podcast and what it's like to be a voice in the industry, what it's like to be a woman of faith in this field. So without further ado, I introduce you to Nichole Frandanisa and her lovely studio. And by the way, if you do hear noises in the background, it's because, and us kind of smile at each other, it's because there was some noises and some remodeling construction going on. So wouldn't be fit as a real estate investment podcast if there weren't a little bit of that action going on. So I introduce you to the lovely Nichole, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation, listening to it as much as I did having it. If anything sparks your interest, please leave a comment and subscribe to get the new episodes for 2024, which I hope to at least double. That is my commitment. I'm saying it out loud on television. So you have my commitment. We have 2024, at least double the amount of 2023 episodes will drop. So that means I need to have 24. Whew. Okay, goals. Let's do this. Happy New Year, y'all, and see ya on the next one. So, hi, Nichole. Welcome to the Home for Humanity podcast, where I talk to people about our human needs and what it means to be a human and what it means to find home, because turns out that's a lot of different things. I've talked to plant people, nature connection people about feeling that sense, that literal sensation of, oh, I'm here, down to and now I want to get more into more housing specific, because I've talked to some people about affordable housing. I'm going to talk to a builder soon and try to just really get into it from all these angles. Yeah. And maybe can you start with, where are we? Thank you so much for inviting me to your studio.
Welcome. Yes, yeah. So I'm just so grateful. Thanks, Sarah, for the opportunity to be in your space and
spending time getting to see the story or the narrative that you're talking about with what home means is something that's near and dear to my heart. So I'm so grateful for what you're doing. Okay, so we are at the PNW Team studios in Bonnie Lake or Lake Tapps, Washington. And this little studio houses a lot of things. It's our space where we allow our agents to film or produce their market updates and anything else they need to do for the success of their business. It's also the home of the Jesus Take the Deal podcast, which is how I get to spend my time. And yeah, so it was so great to have somebody else in this space. And as we were talking offline, I'm like, I spend a lot more time in your seat than I do in my seat. So good luck.
Thank you. I'll take all I can get. There is that element of luck, I feel like, in the beginning of all this. And I just, before I ever was put a video out there on YouTube, I was like so terrified.
Yeah.
And spent years in my head listening to others going, I could never. Mm-hmm. And then going through this process of actually my voice is really important because I feel deep within myself that I have a lot to say.
Yeah.
And I love the opportunity to like get mouthy about it and like have no shame about the voice that I do have.
Yeah.
And using it. And that's why I like focusing on humanity, because I'm like, it is so much bigger than me. And that keeps me humble, to like check myself, and especially within housing too. It's like, oh, there's so many ways, like home is so much. And, yeah, like how do I build my business? And everyone's like, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, it's so huge. The real estate industry, joining it last year. From like a very traditional real estate agent side, and then this year meeting you and all of the Washington real estate investor community. And like just this week I met someone that I met up at their office, someone that I met at a WARI event, and just learning like, oh my God, there's so much more to this than I ever imagined. And so finding my place in it all has been a lot. So maybe let's start with what are you doing in real estate, and how did it start for you? Where was there an inspiration? Were you just
the origin story?
Yeah, let's start there at the origin of this.
Yes. So, it was really my husband, AJ, that had the vision for our family first, that we would participate in real estate somehow. I was panicked to even buy our first house. So that was in 2015 that we bought our first house. And we stole $7,000 out of our retirement. We put it down on our first house. We lived there for 2 years. We didn't make it better at all. And it was time to move because I was pregnant with our son, Wes. And it was time just to get a little closer to family. We sold that house at the right time of the market, and we made $70,000 not doing anything. That was the first time it clicked for me of, oh, this is what you mean about like there's an opportunity to also build wealth on top of being a safe home for our family. So that was really the first catalyst to me even thinking about real estate as anything other than the roof over my head. And fast forward, we did a flip, and that was a journey. And then we bought some rentals, and that was a journey. And then COVID happened. And suddenly my day job, which is all a background in nonprofit and ministry work, came to an end. It stopped. I was laid off from work. I spent 7 months at home, which is a precious gift. It's actually a story that I'm always a little hesitant to share because for many, COVID was really, really painful and isolating. And for my family, it was really grounding to have permission to be home. And our home for the first time became this special sanctuary. And during that time, we were asking ourselves the tough questions of, well, what if my industry doesn't come back from an environment like this? What else can I do? So I got my real estate license just a little bit on a whim that, okay, well, at a minimum, I can help us in our investing. Because real estate was still doing fine. In fact, it was really ramping up. Housing was becoming more and more difficult to come by. Interest rates were plummeting low and historical lows, so people were out there buying. And so I thought, well, gosh, I'll get my real estate license to make this journey easier for our family. And jumped into it not thinking it would become my whole life. I was really naive to the fact that once you put a toe into this community, it has a really special grasp. And so started to dip in and fell in love with the process of helping other people find home, right? Believing that home is where we grow, believing that families deserve to have safe and comfortable and affordable housing. And that's a challenge to find in our state. So being really creative to help put folks in a position where they could do that. In that process, our own investing strategy started to shift. And I was like, I want to know how to own apartment complexes. I'd never done anything like that before. And the only folks I had seen doing something like that were in this online community called WARI, Washington Real Estate Investing. It's a Facebook group that now has 18,000 members in it. But beyond just being a Facebook group, there's a ton of value that comes out of that space every day. You could sit and just scroll posts and learn more about real estate in a day than, trying to self-serve online anywhere else. And so that group needed some support administratively. And I said, well, gosh, be happy to help approve a few folks' posts online. Let's do it. And of course, that's morphed. I now get to serve and support, more of a front-facing platform and hosting the events that WARI puts on. This next week, we're launching a WARI South, which serves the South Sound of Washington. And so we're starting a brand new meetup in Tacoma. And so that's how I get to show up in real estate. I'm an agent. I am an investor. I am an investor community leader. And those things are all brand new as of 3 years ago. So it's a fresh space for me in having conversations about real estate investing and how we can create home for other people.
Do you feel like it's... Because seeing you at the first WARI event, I was like, this girl is in her element. Like, you just are thriving. Do you feel like that a lot of your gifts and desires have clearly come forward? Or do you feel like you're kind of looking on how to evolve, like help evolve your role in it?
Yeah, what a great question. Because I spent so much time every day. I mean, for me, my faith is a really big part of how I show up in this world. So for me, that's my Christian belief that God has a plan for me. And spent a lot of time going, God, why am I in real estate? Mm-hmm. I couldn't imagine. I had worked in the church for a long time and in nonprofit work. And so this was a totally out of my element space. But that being said, I did see as some gift sets aligned, right? Hosting a WARI meetup, being at the front of the room, hosting 60 to 100 people in a space is not much unlike speaking a sermon at church. Right? They actually have a ton of similarities. Totally. And I spent most of my time as a children's pastor. And if you believe it, being a kids pastor and wrangling a room full of investors is pretty similar. So a lot of gift sets aligned. However, if I'm totally honest with you, Sarah, every single day is waking up overcoming imposter syndrome. I get to spend time with and rub shoulders with and make phone calls to people who have just absolutely killed it in the world of real estate investing. And oftentimes my mental space, I have to overcome or battle. Have I done enough? Am I good enough to be in this room? Do I deserve to be here? Me personally overcoming that, I see is also helping other people be able to find room in this investor space. Because I don't show up in that space with 1,000 units, all seller financed, with zero debt to my name, right? Yeah. I show up in that room as being a local mama who works a full-time job, who's got a couple of rentals that we worked hard for. I'm an okay landlord. I'm not a great one, but I'm an okay landlord. And there's other people like me that show up in that space too. And so my goal is to really leverage my own imposter syndrome to make room for other people who might be feeling the same way. So I don't show up in there going, I've totally got this. I'm a badass. I know exactly what I'm saying. Half the time I'm asking questions of our panelists that I want to know personally. So, they'll throw out an acronym or something, NOI. And I'm like, would you share what that means for the group? Viciously taking notes. Net operating income. Okay, great. Cool. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does. I find that so helpful. And I think the questions that I've heard you ask have been like spot on with my, like, wait, what did they just say? Because I'm not I think one reason it's taken me this long to even like find a routine of work that aligns is because I'm just like floundering. I'm asking myself constantly to the heavens, why am I here? Because I had a great realtor back in Missouri. I moved to Washington 2 years ago and moved here for survival skills and outdoor education. And why am I a real estate agent? Now, like, trying to network with investors because I feel like that the work ethic and like my long-term goals are really, there's something here for me. And I love that you just said I'm an okay landlord, because my last interview, like we talked about, a lot of people don't wake up and go like, I want to be a landlord someday. And the more I dive into like the patterns and really I'm in a transaction coordination course right now, and so much of the back end work that I haven't actually done yet, because like creative finance stuff, like they talk about the unethical things that go on in this industry as things to be aware of, things to learn about, what to look out for. And a part of me is like, it's in a lot of industries, but why is it? Because I find it now incredibly important that more day-to-day good-hearted people become landlords and help take responsibility for their neighborhood and their neighbors and the housing of the people they claim to love, which are like the people around them. And a lot of people don't. I mean, I just talked to an investor who owns an apartment building that was like, people really don't like living next to each other. And I'm like, but you're invested in a building that has hundreds of people living next to each other. Like the philosophy around like, well, what does it mean to be a landlord?
Yeah.
Can you speak to that? Like, why, what's that role to you?
Yeah. Huge. It's had different seasons too, if I'm honest. It started out as like a financial strategy. And most of the properties we own, we lived in. So we lived there for a little while. So the neighbors, we know the neighbors. Yeah. They have our phone number, right? They had complaints about us living in the neighborhood. Like, hey, your dog keeps getting out, like, I'm sorry. So we have personal relationship with them. I think we only own one building we've never lived in. And that one I actually pay a little bit more attention to for that one fact. I don't know what is going to easily be broken in that building. I don't know what the little nuances of living in a place of like, oh yeah, that wall just creaks occasionally, those little things. So it started out as a financial strategy, mostly to leave a legacy for our son. It's my goal to own a property fully in my son's name, that when he turns 18, he can choose what he does with it. Do we sell it and maybe he uses those funds to start whatever his life looks like? Does he keep it and keep the cash flow from it each month? Because he'll be halfway to pay it off on that building by then. And so that's really where the heart started from, was how do we protect our family? Well, over time, really quickly, anytime you're in a service posture to people, it impacts your heart in how you're serving folks. And we had an opportunity to work with a local nonprofit called Helping Hands House that supports families in crisis and housing crisis, specifically families. So we're talking adults and children in a space where maybe they don't have a home tomorrow.
What's it called?
Helping Hand House.
Helping Hand House.
Yep, it's an incredible organization. It's Pierce County focused, and its goal is to ensure that nobody has to sleep at night in the street or in a car. So they provide both emergency housing, like we're putting you up in a hotel tonight, and some more longer term options, like, hey, you have 30 days. Let's get you signed on a lease with your name on the lease. If you need a deposit, if you need support with that first month's rent, whatever it's going to be to set you up for success for a long-term lease. So we got the opportunity to welcome a tenant who's being supported by that program. That was the first time that really the heart shift happened of, oh, this is where ministry is for me in this season. Yeah. Honoring and loving and serving our tenants with good housing for good people at a good price. So what that means for our family is good housing. We work hard to take care of our units. I say I'm an okay landlord because I could probably work harder. For good tenants, for good people, that really is, I'm not judging anybody's character by any means. We just want to ensure that when we place a tenant, it's not because we think we're going to get our check next month, but because we believe that they're going to be a good neighbor to that community and they're a great fit in this home too. and then at a good price. We intentionally price our units at 15% under market value. That's our combative effort to not continue the increase of rentals in our community, which would be easy to do. You look at the average and you just price high.
Yeah.
And there's somebody in line for that house.
Yeah.
It also has a financial strategy for us. If we price it 15% lower than market value, we often get a really good pool of tenants. Mm-hmm. And being picky with tenants is part of the ways we protect the other neighbors, right? Ensuring that, they're walked through a proper review ahead of, placement. Make sure that they have great neighbors and that great neighbors have great neighbors, right? Yeah. So that's really where that heart shift came from. And it was like, okay, this is where the ministry happens for us. Providing a home for somebody is a really special opportunity and not one to be taken for granted. And then we have a role in our community as landlords, certainly get a bad rap, especially in Washington State.
It's like illegal to be a landlord, it seems.
It is among landlords we joke like, don't forget to tip your landlord, like we're just normal people really trying to make it easy for you to have a house. And then on the other side, if you're renting a home, it's easy to become dissatisfied with how your landlord's showing up. Maybe they haven't repaired something in a timeline they should have, or maybe rent keeps going up incrementally each month, and unless it's being explained to you as to why this is, it'd be really, really easy to get upset with the people who are providing housing for you, right? So that and then state laws make it a little bit more challenging to be a landlord in Washington. And, my heartbeat is that like we have to talk about it out loud, because if we don't talk about it, mom and pop landlords like myself have to go away.
Yeah.
And what replaces us is really large organizations that treat their tenants more like line items. Mm-hmm. And income and revenue potential versus people in homes. Yeah. So that's where the heartbeat is a little bit for us as landlords.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's amazing. I hadn't heard about Helping Hand House because the little pockets of places for diversity in the housing spectrum, it's like that's what's happening with the big building, because it's happened to building, like mom and pop builders are all but gone, and it's like the one making, it's like that price is now set from the big businesses, so like the little ways that actually there are several steps between being a young renter and being a first-time home buyer. And I learned this and my own journey, like it is scary how close you can get. I mean, just to losing it all.
Oh yeah.
And how even COVID, like just poof, gone for so many people. And like the opportunity to be like, here's 30 days in a place. Yeah. Like here's 6 months in a place. Here's a little bit of money to help. Like that's human to human. Yeah. And I would love to see more grace given to landlords. Yeah. And it's like the war between owners and renters. And I find this in kind of like Nature Connect, the whole world of the Nature Connection movement has many, many facets to it. There's a deep need and a survival aspect to me now in housing. And also the concept of owning land is like gross to so many people. Yeah. And so a lot of people don't want anything to do with it. So they choose to be part of the rental movement. And for many reasons, there are benefits that I'm renting right now. And love it. So I grace is a big thing that's coming up. Like
and it's got to be like this almost like this cascade of grace, right?
Say more.
So when there's several relationships you're talking about there, the tenant to the landlord to the state laws, the state laws to the tenant, right? Like all of those. And unfortunately, there is a narrative or a story right now that's really polarizing. It's pushing those people farther and farther apart from one another. And when we get farther and farther apart, we actually end up becoming very, very dependent on the other, right? So, for example, the more you polarize the tenant-landlord relationship, the more dependent then you are on the state laws to protect you. Or the more you become dependent on the state laws, right? Like whoever you're getting farther from, you become a little more dependent on the other side,
I haven't heard it said that way. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And really those three facets have to work in a ton of collaboration, you know, and to your point, like this grace piece, you know, right now it's really easy to give grace to one of those participants in this relationship. But if grace is offered in all three buckets, for example, if it was easier for me as a landlord to treat this experience as providing good housing for good people and a lot less like a business, then I truly transparently could probably have longer standing tenants, folks that we could spend more time with over time. But right now, when there's like a red flag indicator that perhaps they're come against trouble, or they're making a personal choice not to pay or something like that, that grace has to be limited because state laws are so firm. I have to enact them right away, or I'm not protected and they're not protected by those laws. So as I say, cascading grace, it is really like, how can we have human to human connection in each one of these environments? So for example, I got to show up with my local legislator and say, hey, I'm a landlord and I've got some feelings about this. And then I also choose to always have face-to-face connection with our tenants. So we choose, regardless if we had property management or not, I want to have a face-to-face handshake. This is who I am. Who are you? Tell me about your world, in an environment that's not putting them in a position to feel like they could be biased against housing. So well after they've got their keys, you know, when we have our first walkthrough, just to make sure that the house is working the way they would be hopeful for, it's at that point that I'm asking questions like, you've got kiddos, how old are they, you know, or how do you spend your time, to make this human relationship. So there is an understanding when they say, hey, Nichole, something went sideways at work and I just don't have rent on time this month. What can we do? That I'm approaching that as like, oh, okay, these are really great folks with a really awesome track record. How can we supply them grace today? Instead of going, well, the law says I have to provide notice today, so that I'm protected if this happens again for the next 3 months. You know, so it is it is really challenging to take on being a landlord in Washington State. It's also really challenging to take on being a tenant because your rents are going up every day.
Yeah.
And the upcoming laws can be a challenge to understand too. You know, both sides of the conversation, if there's those that are for them and those that are against them, both sides of the conversation feel like if we don't do anything, it's going to crumble. And that's where we can find alignment. And, we've got to fix this process. Otherwise, it's going to become really far too expensive to live in Washington State. We're going to push out landlords to likely Midwest states where it's a little bit more accepting of mom and pop styles.
Yeah.
And we're going to bring in big business that really does not care about how much they're charging for rent as long as it's going up each month.
I mean, coming from Missouri to Washington State, I think housing being the number one culture shock, and one reason I wanted to be involved because the patterns are happening in the Midwest too. And I've even wondered if investing in Missouri, like to try to build what I see as human to human community building, that work. I wondered if that place might be a better place to start but I live here and love it. And one reason I like renting right now is my landlord is wonderful.
What makes your landlord wonderful?
Well, they're both botanists or like plant people.
Yeah.
And so like the land is covered in gardens and a new greenhouse. And we love to grow food together. And like that's a huge core human need that I have met in the situation that I and the grace with like, oh, well, money is this way and that way, and which hasn't happened too much, thankfully. But he's open to negotiation, like with pricing. When I moved in, he was like, well, let's talk about it. And instead of that, just choosing the highest of the average. I think, wow, I just want to say, like, your choice to choose a little less, to not be a part of that average, that's a key PowerPoint point of like power that landlords hold that I don't think a lot of renters even
different than like housing resale. So in housing resale, you're a real estate agent, right? So you look at a house, you pull the comparable homes to it, you let the data tell you, right? The neighbors already tested the price. and it did or didn't work. So you get to use that information on how do we price a home. It's a black eye on a house, if you will. If you've priced it too high, it has to come down.
Yeah.
It's a bummer. Yeah. It can make a really great home sit on the market longer than it should. Renting's different. Renting's totally different. You can throw it out there at an astronomical price. And if that price comes down, the renting pool gets excited. More excited, like you would with a car. Less than you would with a house. Everybody who's buying a house goes, well, what's wrong with it if nobody wanted it at that price?
Yeah.
A renting pool says like, oh, it just became more affordable. And so that's really where, if there isn't a heart or a passion behind how you price your rentals, then you have the opportunity to unfortunately take advantage and just say, well, I'm going to throw it out there at this crazy price and just see if anybody bites. eBay style. And if nobody bites, I'll just lower it. $50 until somebody finally bites, without any detriment to, this quote unquote listing of a rental. So yeah, it is a choice to price it lower. It is, intentional. We just re-signed leases on one of our units, and it brought me so much joy to tell our tenants we weren't raising the rent on them this year, because we have reasons why we would raise rent. Taxes go up, well, that's more expense and we need to adjust for it. If something else like that, this ongoing regular expense changes, if we're responsible for water and all of a sudden water goes through the roof with the city, well, then we might need to make adjustments. But none of that happened. And so we just got to say, you're good, stay put. We're just going to keep it just as it is. And to have that conversation and just see the sense of relief when they hear their buddies on their left and their right was like, my apartment rent was going to go up $700. Like, I just couldn't. So that's one thing we do. The other thing that I wanted to share and encourage other landlords to consider is communities have a more long-standing established sense with homeowners in the community. Right? You said it best. Renting has a space and a purpose. It is a great gift. I know many investors that choose to rent just so they're not tied down, so they can keep investing wherever they want and be flexible with it. But home ownership, those roots in a community can really bring a depth of life in a community. So we have a clause in our leases that allow our tenants to exit their lease should they be buying a home, and that's because I believe, right, homeownership makes community. And if a tenant just simply can't buy a home because their lease goes until March, then it's like, no, I believe they should have the flexibility to exit their lease for the purpose of homeownership.
Oh, bless you. That's beautiful.
It's not very noble. I also tell them that I'm a real estate agent and they're welcome to use me. So this way I stay in the loop.
Totally. But I think that could prevent people from being like, well, I can't even begin my search until next year at that time or at a super later date.
Right.
Then they might actually be ready.
And it's a battle to line that up. Like, okay, my lease ends in March. Totally. So I gotta be in my house by beginning of March, which means I gotta find it by, beginning of February, which means I have to be pre-approved for it in January. Like, to walk that backwards and hope that it all goes to plan.
Yeah. And hope that the market's numbers match my numbers and everything is, it can actually be done. Wow. So yeah, that covers where does faith meet your business? I think we did cover a lot of that, like how those two things meet for you. And so I kind of want to dive into faith for a little while.
Oh, please. It's my favorite topic.
It's my favorite topic. And I think I'm just going to skip closer because
get comfy. Well, settle in.
Settle in. I have literally written down what is faith. And then trusting the path laid before you versus letting life be what it is. Because, like I mentioned, I just feel like I've been run through the heavy cycle on a washer. Yeah. And I'm like, am I even supposed to be here? Yeah. And the mountain that it feels like so often I'm like climbing, and then I meet amazing people where I'm like, oh, I don't have to be scared of all of these like nightmarish dark things that are out there, because that's one reason my heart pulls me toward the light in this situation, because like everything we've already talked about are huge barriers that just, I think, that push people down.
Yeah.
And how can I be the light to help pull people up? And yeah, I guess I get glimpses of feeling that kind of strength and power, and like, oh, I am okay where I'm at. I believe I am on the right path.
Yeah.
And that faith seems to be like a candle that just like, is it out? Is it still there? Is it out?
Yes.
I'm thinking, fire actually is a great analogy, because working with fire and survival skills is like, are you okay? As you build it from nothing, it's like, and then it goes out and it's like,
wow.
That's that
It's
journey
a really
that I
beautiful
just
analogy,
made
actually.
sounds about.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is faith? What is faith?
Yeah, faith in my perspective is what you put your hope in.
Mm.
So that's a loose way, because true, in my world, my faith and hope is in Jesus Christ, right? So I've got a really specific answer to that. But I realize that's not how everybody shows up, and that perhaps they haven't had the opportunity to know Jesus, or perhaps they have and something went differently than they were hopeful and they made an alternative choice. But faith in its simplest form is, what do you put your hope in? Here's where it gets tricky, is that if we're putting our hope in something that is not sustaining, that is impacted by circumstance, that can be tossed with the winds of life, then we too can be tossed with the winds of life, right? It's very much like if you're on a ship and the waters get crazy. If you don't have the horizon to look at, right, you too can get kind of tossed and turned. Or even your analogy of a fire, faith, we do have to stoke our faith. We do have to be focused on our faith and pay attention to our faith. We have to ensure there's oxygen to it. We have to do our part to really build our faith. And if something gets snuffed out, that's because something went sideways, right? The oxygen wasn't there, didn't have the right environment to burn in. And what I appreciated about how my faith shows up in my life is that it's not on my shoulders. The Lord says, I am qualified and I am able, I am chosen. He has deemed me worthy beyond my own capacity to be worthy, and it has nothing to do with my works. It's everything to do with my relationship and choice to believe in Jesus Christ. And so that's how faith shows up for me. But leading life with your faith at the forefront, that's what I get to spend time on my podcast talking about, is how do we let faith be the guide to what we're doing? And once again, that shows up for other people differently. And I can imagine too, in some environments, hearing somebody talk about their faith in Jesus, if somebody doesn't believe the same way, can be a little polarizing. But I'm so grateful, on the Jesus Take the Deal podcast, I get to have conversations with people that think totally differently than I do. And I get to learn and I get to ask questions. And my goal is never to impose my own faith on them. In fact, I believe if Jesus would have that for them, that's up to him, not for me. God, your will, your bill. It's on you, right? I just get to be faithful is what I get to do. And God gets to provide the fruit. So in my world, leading my life with my faith looks like a couple different things. You can probably even see it in the way I choose to speak, the fruit of what comes out of me. It's a posture of gratitude and thanksgiving, and it also has a ton of contentment with my housing, contentment with whatever my situation might be, just to go, God, you got it. You knew when I didn't know, and I'm going to be faithful in this season, believing that you've got something in store or purpose here. So many folks find kind of the stability in their faith is their purpose, right? And if you have a purpose to, like, why, Sarah, are you alive? Why did you wake up today? What are you doing for humanity around you? How are you going to leave an impact? But also, how are others going to impact and imprint on your life? This topic of purpose takes us out of the throes of, man, rent was hard to pay last month. And I don't feel like I'm making ground in my community or building relationships really strongly. Or would anybody notice if I just didn't show up today? Right? Our faith and our purpose helps pull us from that level of thinking into a space of contentment. Long answer for a short question.
As it should be. I mean, like, what a question. What a
question. What is faith?
it's actually, I mean, when I moved here, it was to do a 9-month naturalist program in Duval at Wilderness Awareness School, and I wrote a lot of poetry. Well, I love just writing in general, but one of the things that I wrote, I think within a poem, was something about so much gets lost in the darkness. Like faith too will go out.
Absolutely.
And maybe that's why the analogy of the candle came out, because there's this almost visceral feeling of stepping into just the complete unknown, and just like feeling the little flame within me just go.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I learned the most about faith.
Yeah.
Because I was raised with deep conviction for Jesus Christ. And stepped out of it completely. And I think I mean, the language I would use is that, like, I turned away from God and turned towards the goddess. And because my power as a woman, my feminine power, became really foreign to me. Yeah. And when people talk about the patriarchy right now, I'm like, oh, stop, just get over it. But then I really start to feel all the layers of that, and I'm like, oh, what it was my belief in this, like, you know, patriarchal Christian kingdom of, you know, national, was that the thing that, like, limited me? And I go back and forth with this so much, and now I feel like acknowledging, I don't know, I say God, goddess, and spirit, because there is this, like, ebbing and flowing. I think about, like, the sides of our body and how my brain can go back and forth, and whatever God is now to me is that purpose. God is purpose. And, like, the goddess is the longing to follow that purpose, and the source of longing itself, and the spirit is just like, I don't know, this is crude, but, like, I think about, like, this, I'm a spirit bag. Like, my body is like this, like, compartmentalized spirit. And I have such, I mean, going back to gratitude, just amazement and gratitude for being able to just, like, move about this realm as a force, and find myself going back to God. So I think of this phrase, like, when people look to leaders look to God. And what is, can we go there with, like, women and the relationship to God? Because I feel like, so what I see so much today, you know, I mean, even in the context of a holy war, like, well, where is God in that? And also, this is too many questions. I have this pattern sometimes. I'm, like, circling around something, and then I get to it. But so, and that's kind of, where do you want to take that? Like, towards that, or, like, the feeling of being empowered as a woman within the church?
Absolutely. I mean, that's probably the one I feel the most equipped to touch in on, because certainly there are complexities with the Christian faith that regularly I feel ill-equipped to talk on, right? Not because it's not important, or not because it doesn't matter, but rather, like, I've got work to do to understand why I believe what I believe in some of these things. And never have I loved a person who's like, this is just the way it is. And recently I really feel like the Lord's been working on my conviction from moving from a feeling into an understanding. From it being a place of, like, I just feel like this is what is right, to, no, I know and understand, and this is why. Theologically, this is why. So that's new territory for me. But absolutely what I can speak to in my world about being a woman in the church is that God had a ton of intentionality, right? When we've got, of course, Bible stories on Bible stories to look back to of really powerful women. The book was also, the Bible was written by men. So in the same way that we learn about these powerful women, it's through a lens of a man. And with that, I think back even to, if we're talking origin stories, Adam and Eve. God created all of creation. He created man from man's side in the form of partnership. From his rib, he blew life into woman. And it's at that point that he says, this is good. So I find so much empowerment as a woman in the church to understand that we were the crown of creation. That it is when God created woman that he said, okay, we're good. Go be fruitful and multiply. A lot of the empowerment of being a woman of faith comes from my personal relationship with Jesus. Who does God say I am? What does he say about me, and do I believe it? Right? God calls me a masterpiece in the Bible. He calls me worthy. He calls me qualified. I think of 2 Corinthians 3:5 that says, it is not by my own works that I am qualified, but it's Christ within me that qualifies me. And then God calls us to some of the most important jobs in the world, motherhood being one of them. Motherhood in and of itself will radically change your perspective on what unconditional love might mean. Suddenly, it's like your heart's walking outside of your body. And if I believe that the life we live each day is a reflection of God, then for the first time, I really got to get a sense of, holy moly, if I love this tiny human that much, how much more does my God love me? And that was just mind-blowing. The fact that God gives us that opportunity to grow humanity, to birth the next generation, to love and steward it, what a stinking job. So I find day in and day out so much power as a woman of faith to love the sisterhood of people around me, to help lift up other women in my life, to have the sole responsibility to birth the next generation. Those are some of the factors that I really look to and go, God, you had a plan when you made woman. And I don't have to feel small because of some of the complications in our culture around what it means to be a man or what it means to be a woman. I don't have to feel like attached to any of those because my hope is in the Lord. My hope is not in our human capacity to have it all figured out. And I will put my hope in the Creator and not in the creation. So it also means, transparently, especially people of faith, we got to check ourselves if we're putting our hope in one person's teachings or in one podcast or in one book talking about the book of the Bible, right? And I think that's probably where we need to get a little more transparent as believers in the Lord is, hey, if your conviction's coming from what your pastor says on Sunday morning, but not from your personal time of worship, your personal time of prayer, or your personal reflection of the Bible, then it came through a man. Someone else. It came through somebody else. It's been filtered. So that's where I think, that we could go wrong a little bit is when we don't seek out the source, but rather a sub-source or a counterfeit source sometimes.
Wow. Actually, just you said the source, it made me think of this retreat I went to called Return to the Source. And it was a huge catalyst. It was like an outdoor parkour adventure type retreat.
Oh, wow.
Just like living on the land and just adventuring with people in nature. And it was this like awakening experience of, well, first of all, I'd never jumped off cliffs before into water, and that was an opportunity to be like, oh, I'm alive, And then I was here in Washington. I was like, this place is amazing, and I visited Wilderness Foreign School right after, and it was like, there was, I don't know, so like the source that just highlights this, like, oh yeah, I like found something of a source in like energy, and was like, I felt it so fully, and I feel like just following the path that led me down is a big part of why I'm even here. And as well as what you said about like seeing, how did you say it? Like the creator over the creation, respect or listen to.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to seek out the creator. It's the same way when you look at like a beautiful piece of art and your first thought is, oh my goodness, who made this? Right? Creation itself, even if we bring it to nature, right? We look at, especially in Washington, it truly, if anybody's listening to this and you have not been to Washington, you have to come. It's beautiful. It is so outstanding that we can really get lost in going, I need to worship this land, or I need to worship, the being one with nature. And even that is a little counterfeit because it's so beautiful. Gosh, who made this?
Yeah.
You know? And so that's really what I say when I say, hey, it's really time to, you know, in my world, it's all for me. If somebody else takes something from it, awesome. But this is all God's reminder to me, is that it is at every one of these points, my hope can't be in any of them. It can't be in creation. Creation will even fall apart, right? Mm-hmm. If it's not stewarded, if it's not loved, if it's not taken care of, if it's not all of these other biblical principles, right? But
stewardship. Yeah.
Stewardship being the big one, you know, but it is the creator that deserves our attention. And certainly we get to be so grateful for the things he's created, like the feet, you know, or like the fact that we can put our feet on the ground and feel something, or sit by water for a little bit of time and hear a story in it.
Yeah.
You know, those special things come from a really almighty God, which is really special.
Oh, it's beautiful. I mean, the guidance from songs on the wind and the whispers through water and the feeling, the sensations that come up from the ground through my feet, like, or my body, from like my whole body. And I think that I can so deeply, I think you're my witness for this. Like the revelations, like though that word is coming to mind, like the openings of what can come through acknowledging that that the creation isn't all of it. Like there's more, and I don't know. It's like the spirit that moves through all things. That there is something else that to acknowledge, like the doctrines of man, or the doctrine of humankind, and it's tricky. I feel like I'm in this tricky water right now of like, actually I'm trying to like help humanity without transcending it. And I find that I mean one reason I wasn't too like secure or empowered as a woman as part of the narrative I was raised with was that I mean it sounds like you were a pastor for youth, right? And like my church, there was no female leadership at all. And so I was just raised to believe like, oh, that's for you, not me. And something that actually made me feel really empowered and at peace with that place of being like second to was this idea or sensation of transcendence. Like actually this is all momentary. And there is something greater. And like what is the danger of that? Like is there a stuckness that you've felt in that territory too, of like, actually I'm here to pull along the threads that the creator is lining up for me? And also, how do I tend it so peaceably when I know that this is all just short?
What a phenomenal question that I feel like everybody I've ever met battles with.
Okay.
Whether they know it or not, right? Like maybe they can't articulate it as beautifully as you can. Sarah, you've got a really beautiful way of unpacking your thoughts. I know you described it, or the visual of like the spiral of coming back to the drain of what am I actually trying to say?
Shower drain.
But you really, I know, I saw it the same way. But really, you've got a really phenomenal way of working towards what a beautiful question like the one you just asked. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I think it will always be the cry of humanity to feel like, are these the right puzzle pieces for what my life should look like? Or am I taking the next chess move of, if I do this, then this will happen, and then this will happen, and then this will happen, right? And I think that pressure is a really human experience to go, you know, some might process this as like on this, you know, in this timeline of my life, you know, but maybe there's an alternate. Like, had I done this one thing different, had you not moved from Missouri, what would life look like?
I think about it
all the time. And we could really lose a lot of life in that brain space. You know, so yes, I've certainly felt stuck. Yes, I've certainly questioned. I mean, I kind of, you know, we opened this up with like the fact that, you know, most days in real estate, I ask the Lord, like, all right, God, why do you have me here? What's the reason? I think there's so much nobility in the willingness to ask that question of why am I here? And maybe for some, they're asking that question of God. Maybe for others, they're asking it of themselves. I had the opportunity to interview somebody yesterday whose family's values are based on the question, what do I want to be known for? And I think a question like that is a get you out of jail, get you unstuck question. Mm-hmm. If you're feeling stuck between like, have I pulled all the right strings? Have I done all the right things for my life? And yet I'm still not seeing the fruit of all of this. That a question like, what do I want to be known for? Will really help you develop some values. And life's going to happen to you, or you're going to happen with and for life. And a question like that, I think, helps, build some roots. And values they just end up being the lens in which we operate life through. Both how we process the things that happen to us and how we make decisions on the things that we're going to essentially do to others, right? And so having a core set of values, I really think is the bridge for the unstuck. Especially if somebody's maybe not positioned to go, okay, God, I fully surrender life to you. I'm content right where I'm at. What would you have for me? If somebody's not acknowledging where they put their hope, but maybe it's just someplace else. Like I put my hope in my belief that there's a purpose for each human on the face of the earth. Then a question like, what are my core values and what do I want to be known for will really help change that. The last thing I want to say on that is that just from a science perspective of the brain, that the same part of the brain that feels anxiety is the same thing that lights up when we feel gratitude and thankfulness, and that those two feelings cannot happen simultaneously. So if you're enduring a life of anxiety and struggle and trouble, on questioning like, this feels like the darkness, am I in the right place? That your greatest weapon of choice is joy, or in this case, gratitude and thankfulness. So for anybody that's feeling that stuck that you're talking about, my encouragement is you can't be anxious and grateful at the same time. Mm. So intentionally spend time in gratitude and watch what happens.
Mm. I love that. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of sit spot. It's one of the core practices of in all the sensory meditations or aspects to we do this with the kids. We call it and adults too, but fox walking, like walking really, really softly on the ground to tune into what you feel, and deer ears and owl eyes to try to see with your periphery. Like it's leaning into the senses that this body can do, and sit spot is one of sitting in one place every day and watching the seasons change. You have no agenda other than to sit there. It's super countercultural to just sit there and observe. But it's hard not to feel gratitude after really becoming accustomed and building a relationship with all of the beings of one place. Going back to the importance of community building and how landlords and tenants have the opportunity to really, repair culture and rebuild community where there isn't any, maybe. That the invitation is there. That's what I kind of hear. And kind of when what you're saying is, and that the creation and maybe the creator behind it were calling to me as inviting me into the life that is happening.
Huge.
Because the darkness and I don't love to call it the darkness because there's so much beauty in actually the dark and the night.
Huge.
To stay up all night in the darkness, out in the forest where there's no electricity, or the desert where there's no, you can see the Milky Way because there's no more light pollution. And the magic and what is alive and beautiful and guiding in the darkness is valid. And without acknowledging that the life and light that is happening that I choose not to partake in is something of a choice, and just not willing to open my eyes to the beauty.
Yeah.
That's there. Actually, I wrote this here last night that this popped into my head. It said, say thank you. And if that doesn't work, say it louder.
Huge. Absolutely.
And it's to feel it, to actually remember that that's what this is. It's the body is the gift.
Oh my goodness. And if you start at gratitude, where you will end up in all things is pretty incredible. Like in a work environment, if you are the most grateful person in the room, you will also probably have the most opportunity, the most, right, gratitude coming back at you, likely the most fulfillment, because you're posturing everything from gratitude, you know? And so whether it's that, even think about your housing circumstance. To hear you talk about how grateful you are for your landlords because of truly what you said in short, I like my landlords because they planted things, right?
We have tea time. We have cookouts and fires.
Huge, right? And you have this gratitude for something that somebody may have overlooked that could have changed their perspective of the house they live in or the place that they live. But a heart posture of gratitude is one of the most incredible things. I once did a whole sermon on my weapon of choice, joy. And joy will always overcome anger or working harder, right? It is the joyful ones that have so much peace in exactly what they have, instead of the burden and the anger and the heaviness of having to strive for more. That's what I got to say on that.
How are we doing on time?
Oh, yeah.
I'm on your time.
Oh, you're a gift. I probably have about 10 more minutes.
10? Okay.
What else do you want to know, Miss Sarah?
Marriage.
Oh, my second favorite topic.
I have pros and cons of marriage because I tell you, I mean, my marriage to Justin was a huge part of my journey here.
Yes.
We did not live together for a period of time. We took trips. We're like in this huge state, and that's part of the darkness and questioning that I allowed to come in, because part of my, and I've heard this reflected, and I just want it to be true, so I'm going to say it more, is that I really strive to be authentic.
Yeah.
And I was seeing all the ways that my marriage wasn't fully authentic.
Yeah.
And I was like, let's evaluate this.
Yeah.
And let's be real. Yeah. Like, is this worth it?
Yeah.
And the way you acknowledge AJ at the beginning of the War events, I'm like, there's some, like, when I brought Justin to the last event, I was like, I want that. Like, like there's something beautiful about standing in front of people and being like, I want to acknowledge this guy. Yeah. Everyone show him some gratitude because I have a lot of it. Yeah. I think it was beautiful.
Oh, wow.
And so with the last little bit, can we maybe go into like...
Yes,
just
absolutely.
What do you love about it?
My favorite human. So that I can unpack my thoughts well, can you give me an update on where things are at with you and Justin?
Yeah, he lives where I live now and full-time with me now as of the summer. Yeah. And so that's going really well. We... are kind of in the where do we want to invest, or where do I want to do my work in Western Seattle? So we're thinking of buying an RV so that we can be a little more mobile, because listings here and 2 hours that way, and it's like there's a lot from Duval, so if we can be more flexible. So it's like this, we're in the chapter of reimagining a new chapter.
Like, beautiful way to put that.
The future holds.
How long have you been married?
8 years now.
Oh my goodness, you've got time under your belt, girl. Got it. Okay, thank you. Thanks for being transparent and for sharing too. I think, marriage is one of those things that we hold really, really close to our heart. And I don't know if you've ever encountered it, but maybe you get news of somebody whose marriage has ended and you're like, I had no idea that they were even struggling. Yeah. And so I'm always grateful for really transparent conversations about marriage, because I think it's what helps remind us, like, oh yeah, like real people have real problems. And attaching your life to a whole nother human is a really big choice.
It's really scary.
So pros and cons. And transparently, I actually sit on one side of that a lot more, if you can imagine, than the other. So for balanced conversation, you might seek out other people's thoughts too. I'm very pro the idea, if you have the opportunity to understand that tying your life to another human, in my opinion, is the second most important choice you will make in life. The first, of course, in my perspective, is your faith perspective. The second is, this is a make or break person in your world. Who you tie your life to is going to fully determine, in a lot of ways, some of the outcomes of what life looks like for you. Some for the better, maybe some for the worse. And if you choose at any point to say, okay, this is not working, I'm going to put a period on this chapter, that you will carry with you forever the hard parts and the joys of the chapter before. And you will bring that into maybe the next relationship or the next person you tie yourself to. So with that in mind, I do take the topic of marriage super, super serious. I also recognize that where some might say they were really lucky in who they tied themselves to, I will say I've been very blessed. I joke all the time with AJ that he outkicked his coverage as a way to totally mask over the fact that I do not know what my legacy of generations before me did for me to have such an incredible husband like the one I have. It's probably the only place I'll get emotional at.
I really,
I know. My husband AJ is an incredible human, and what makes him so incredible is this posture that at some point he decided that was best for our life was to no longer have individual or single lives, but to live a life together. And it is his everyday goal to make that life a little more sweeter, a little more safe, and a little more intentional than the day before. Now, it is my greatest joy that he gets to, that my sweet son gets to live in this with us. Because I've been living in it on my own, in this secret, safe space of encouragement and love and care. My husband leads our family really, really well. And I think that's one of the things, too, that's helped kind of change my perspective on what it means to be a woman of faith. Is that words like submission and following your husband and being led by your husband sound really, really, really foreign or uncomfortable or maybe like, yeah, it's totally culturally counterintuitive until you have a really good husband. And then you're like, done, lead me, babe, wherever you want to take me, let's go. Throw me around. AJ's heart is in the right place every day, so I have no doubt of his intention and his integrity. He cares about character way more than he cares about charisma. He cares about what God thinks and what I think over what anybody else thinks. And that has dramatically changed our life. He is not living a life unto anybody else's standards. Our marriage looks a lot different than even other marriages in our family. In fact, I on the side have been marrying people for like 10 years. I'm a licensed officiant. And so helping other people get married is something I get the opportunity to do a lot. And I will always ask a couple, who is it that you're looking towards that you say, I want to have a marriage like yours? Almost every couple I talk with and ask that question to, they actually don't have an example. They go, well, gosh, my parents were never married, or, we just had a nasty divorce in the family, or there's a lot less examples of really phenomenal marriages out there than there's ever been before. And so I am so grateful that when that conversation comes up, or maybe in groups, people start complaining about their spouse or something like that, I've got nothing to add to that conversation. Because my spouse wakes up every single day going, how can I love Nichole a little bit more than I loved her yesterday? Nothing is more empowering than that, because that literally sparks like a really healthy competition where I go, AJ, man, he really knocked you out of the park yesterday. What can I do to make him feel so loved and seen? Like he made dinner, he cleaned the house, he left me a little love note. Like these things that are this pursuit of a healthy household makes me go like, ooh, I want to do my part, not because I'm forced to, not because I'm have to, not because it's expected of me, but because my husband has chosen to go 100% in my direction, even if I don't have energy to go 100% in his. So he takes on his 100%. I take on my 100% when I can, although I will say it is a place where I regularly go, Lord, give me more capacity to show up for AJ like he shows up for me. But if we're each going and have the intention of going 100%, on the days where we feel a little less, we still have so much overlap. If you're going 50-50 and you have one of those days, you didn't hit the gap. So super blessed. I wasn't picky. I was faithful to go, God, what would you have for me? When I first met AJ, he was, I don't know, like 160 pounds, like scrawny homeschool kid. And my heart just didn't see it initially. And then one day the Lord just opened my eyes. And I was like, wait a minute. I want to be that guy's wife. And it's just like a fine wine. I realize he's not in this room and nobody can see him. But the man is like a 6 foot something tall drink of water with a gorgeous beard, and he's strong. And it truly is like, Lord, I do not know what I did to deserve this. I'm pretty sure it's legacies of family members ahead of me that prayed faithfully that I might have a good husband, because I have the best one, hands down.
Oh, that's beautiful. I resonate with a lot of that. Like, I've been blown away with the journey of marriage, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about it. And in our the previous chapter we have just left, something very feels vulnerable to share, but I think it's really important in this moment. Like, something Justin said to me was like, I know that it would be easier for you if we just went our separate ways, because like there was just this, like, I just was wrestling, like my hips were hurting, that kind of wrestling. And he's like, but I'm just gonna love you more. Because he could see, like, the journey I was going through, the pain I was going through was not fully about him. And I think, I mean, you just brought up like how housing is involved in marriage, how faith is involved in marriage, how that it doesn't quite feel so subservient unless it's all in my mind and I'm letting it be that way. But to feel so empowered by someone through love, and the actual ability for me to be outside of myself, like kind of the way you described motherhood, is like my heart is walking around now. And that is so scary. And I just think about just a lot of the just falling apartness of things. It's like you add housing insecurity in that, you add stress, you add all these things. Like I found it so easy to just like guard up my heart, harden it, build those walls, and be like, I'm just safer in here. And I loved how you said, like, actually, take it, because it's actually way more exhausting than the faith in allowing myself to be loved. Like that, and that was I didn't know I needed that journey. And now it's a sweet place to be. And like there's I'm only 8 years in, so there's goodness. There's like all sorts
there's a lifetime ahead.
And the chapters of it, I feel like allowing it to be reborn.
And good on you, Sarah, just like full honor for going through a tricky time in your marriage and choosing to remain. That is going to have heaps of blessings for you. And it sounds like Justin's heart posture of like, you can try and run. I'm just going to love you more. I'm just going to add an extra dose of love, an extra dose of care. I often feel like the Lord knows what we need when we don't. And having that special relationship, or this safety in a relationship that says, like, I could lose my mind today and my husband is still going to be stable, So I just want to honor you for making that choice. It is, I don't know about for you, but for me, ahead of marriage, it was really, really easy for me to accept kind of the negative outcome. I told AJ, I tried to break up with him 3 times before we got married. And each time I said, hey, buddy, sometimes Christian people date and they don't get married. It's not like a ring by spring situation. Like, sometimes we can just be two God-loving people and doesn't mean we're right for each other. And AJ had the same approach. He said, you can feel that way today, but I think you're just a little tired and maybe you just need a snack. So go take a rest and sleep. We'll chat in the morning and see how you feel then. And refused to let me break up with him. And that type of like hook of like hey, I love you. You might want to run, but I am only going to love you more. And I'm here, and I believe this is true. Is super sweet. So I'm grateful for you. I'm so grateful that you're willing to be transparent in this space, because like I said, I think it's one thing that people, they really do put their guard up on how do they share that story with other people. Maybe they don't want to cast shame on their partner, or maybe they don't want to feel the shame that they've worked up in their mind might be associated with being transparent about it. But when you are that, you often get to share your story and create purpose and pain for other people. The pain that you've endured of some of the challenges you faced on your own and together, and your choice to maybe live apart and then now live back together. Being able to share that, really does, I think, change somebody else's perspective that it's totally normal and totally okay to have hard chapters. Especially if you go, but I'm staying in it. Because that's where the story comes from.
Yeah. Amen. I wrote down purpose and pain because working with kids now, and we start and end every day with gratitude. That's some of the lessons we brought up from Nature Connection School, and like what we're trying to instill in the next generation is. And I just had a kid yesterday be like, "Oh, I'm so angry and I'm so scared," and I'm like, I get scared too. Like starting on a day afraid is not fun, buddy, and I understand. And like I think that's been medicine for me. It's like, oh, that thing that I'm doing, I don't know, the spiral of it all is really beautiful. So thank you for letting me go there in this conversation.
Thank you. Blessed me immensely. Truly. Just the questions you have, the voice you have, and the work that you're doing. It can feel challenging that, like, okay, God, what do these days have for me right now? And the ones that feel dark or confusing, I just so see in you, Sarah, intentionality that will pull you through any chapter. So I just want to honor you and thank you for hosting a conversation like that. That brings life to somebody like me and is a gift to, I'm sure, the others that enjoy your podcast. And you have a really, really, really special voice. And I'm hopeful that others see that too.
Thank you. Thank you, Nichole. I want to honor you for doing the exact same and helping me get there myself. Like you talk about having imposter syndrome and doing it anyway, and you creating the space. Like, that's me. I'm doing this because of you. And like the vulnerability that I feel right now here is because you took that jump and the faith to start Jesus Take the Deal and talk about it with real voices out loud. And that's getting harder to do. And thank you. Thank you so much for doing it and being brave.
In the words of Chick-fil-A, my pleasure.
It's been my pleasure too. Thank you for your time today.
So good, buddy.
So good, buddy.